Hi folks, and welcome back to this second part of our session on gig racing, looking at racing starts and how we can do those well. So again, what we're looking at in this one is just making sure we get those effective starts. We're looking at some of the different situations you can encounter, and we're looking at what we can do to try and help us get these good starts. So let's crack on. If you want to watch the first part again, you can do. Obviously, this is the second part of this session for you. Okay, so which boat here is likely to cause a crash? Okay, that purple dot is representing a buoy in the distance. Obviously, a buoy wouldn't be quite that close, but what we're showing is over the distance the line coming in. So which boats there do you think are potentially going to be causing a crash? Okay, let's have a look at see what your answers are and see what we've got. Okay, so well, actually, the angle that they are is likely to cause a collision if they're not out in front or behind. Okay, so we would kind of only really recommend it if you've got a crew that's strong enough to use this position. I used this recently when I was coxing the men's super vets at our regatta, and by positioning on the inside and getting those ones there was helpful, but we had to then beat that closest boat on that. Otherwise, it was going to cause me a real problem. We did well, we rode really hard, and we had a great turn. But you need to make sure if you're picking that inside berth that you're doing it with a crew that's strong enough to make the use of it by comparison to the other crews there. B, I'll point out, is unfortunately the one that's most likely to get crashed into in this situation. Okay, and again, that could be representing a few boats in the middle there, or just one crew. But ultimately, what you see is that boat A and boat C's line are both potentially problematic for us. And so, of course, there we give that to C. C, if they hold their line and then stays in line with the other B, they're likely to end up either causing a collision between the other two boats or causing another boat to come in to them. And different coxswains, depending on their level of experience and courage, will either might see and start move over to give towards try and get that line, or they might try and hold it and want to get into that buoy and so clash with C. Okay, so again, in this case, C might want to move over a little bit or consider what actions they're going to be taking on there. So again, what looked like a simple situation is actually quite complicated, but it basically comes into how strong is your crew? Are you going to try and push up harder, or are you going to try and push down and let others go and cut in? So let's talk about the start itself. So while the rowers start, okay, it will occasionally change. I know different places, different theories on those things. Over the years, we've had a variety of different ways and different theories. Ultimately, the rowers start is when they start rowing and get the boat moving. Okay, as a coxswain, yes, you kind of shout the first bit, but really it should kind of be on the rowers to row that first start. It shouldn't really be on you guys to call it, because you've got a lot going on and you're trying to drive and do lots of things. You kind of, in a car, want your engine to control itself. You don't want to be micromanaging your engine, because that takes your focus away from all the other bits. So really, what we might refer to as the rowers start, we kind of want them to know what they're doing and to go through it without too much input from you. Okay. However, all the coxswains, all they want to achieve is a nice good start, as we talked about before. So all coxswains will want to try and achieve a running start. You can ask any starter how much of a pain in the ass coxswains are, and they'll always try and have the boat moving when coming up to start line when it's shouted go, because it's just adding momentum is easier than starting momentum. So anyway, all we'll try. We can't always get it, and by trying to do so, you may either A, place your crew over the line, and that might either force you to go back if they're being nice, or if they're not being nice, or it's the sillies, and you end up over the line at the wrong time, that might actually disqualify or DQ the crew. You don't want to be that cox. B, you will be put behind the line when the call is given. If because you're hanging back, trying to then tap up on those things like that, they might get frustrated. So if you're too far back, as we saw in that earlier one there, if you're too far back, your starter might be likely to shout go, and you then have a boat length or ready to catch up. Okay, so you got to be careful. So often the best option is going to vary with the condition of the cruise. So we're thinking about that tide and current pushing you towards the line. You kind of want to hold back from the line a little, holding back until the time comes, and then do so slowly. As you're told to come up, do so slowly, aiming to keep motion where possible. Not big, strong strokes until you're just literally about to hear that go. Okay, so try and tap up just so you then keep the motion on that. It tends to be in line on those things there. When the tide, however, is pushing against you, you're going to need to kind of line up with the other boats further away from the start line. You don't want to be the person who is going through that line, and so you want to make sure that you have the ability to hold back and then tap up to that line. Okay, you might need to tap up occasionally. That's not necessarily a bad thing in order to keep a position or to hold on to or drop back according to what the umpire is saying. Okay, but you're going to have to be quite careful on that. On there, hopefully the umpire gets a fairly quick start. They'll tend to be aware of this if it's happening, and so they'll tend to have a fairly quick start if they're an experienced umpire or starter. Like for instance, Dartmouth, they tend to have quite quick starts there. If the river's starting to flow out and it's starting to push people down the line, they'll do as soon as they get people roughly in line, bang, they shout go. So you'll be aware of that. Okay, but remember, when start is called, you need to tell the crew to do their rower start, and then over the next 3 minutes, you need to think about your boat's position, your speed compared to your nearest crews, also any upcoming obstacles and navigation elements, but also the location and position of the buoy. Hopefully you'll be aware of it. Hopefully you've seen it before, but make sure you're aware of it. Make sure you're aware also of how many buoys. That can always be a problem if you forget how many buoys there are. Anyway, so setting your line. When we are off and we're going from the start, you need to consider what's called good seamanship. Okay, it does say in the CPGA rules that you should be setting a good course or a good line. You're not permitted to zigzag around the course. You are allowed to change your line if that suits, so if there's a problem, etc. there. But generally, you should aim to keep a fairly straight line. Now, you want to do that as much as possible just using the actual rowers. You don't really want to put on the rudder because the rudder is a handbrake. Remember that. Rudder is a handbrake. Once you've got that part, I want you to think carefully. Do I need to tap this? Could I ask maybe for bowside to give me a little bit more, just to straighten my line there, or do I need a little bit more from the stroke side just to tweak it? Okay, we don't particularly want to steer by putting the brake on more than necessary. Okay, sometimes it might be, but generally we're wanting a fairly light hand on the rudder. However, we are going to need to also bear in mind that current, tide, crosswind, all those things that we're referring to as current, and let's say the current for the purposes as we said about it earlier, you need to be aware of how that may push you as you're aiming or directing towards the mark. So if we look at A, if we assume that there is current coming from the west, there's a little compass in the top, you can see that's on the left hand side of it. If we assume it's coming from the west towards the east and the current is pushing in that way, although we want to aim for that nice purple dot, actually we're not going to aim for that purple dot. We're going to set out with our boat at a slightly different angle on there. We can look at it and see there, and we're going to ferry drift. We're going to drift over to it and turn on those things there, recognizing that as we row, as we move forward, we are going to be being pushed towards the eastern side. With B, if there's no real current or factor, or it's only very weak, then B is going to be what most people will be steering on that way. If then we look at C, we see C is kind of the reverse of A. So in this case, if you've got a strong current pushing from the east to the west, driving us around there, then we are going to again be looking to basically do the ferry drift on the opposite direction there, and we're going to use that to try and help us to get that good line. Okay, so this is going to help us get up to the line, and you want to follow that line as much as is possible with minimal rudder going through, particularly in those first 4 or 5 minutes where speed matters. Yeah, and you do not want to be slowing your boat if you don't have to. So try where you can to avoid heavy-handed rudder usage. Try to maybe tweak and say a little bit more from you here, a little bit more there, and that will help on that. Okay, so let's look at the next bit. Dealing with collisions or a clash. Well, first of all, what if it's happening ahead of you and you've got time to look at it? Well, first of all, what do you need to do? Well, if there's a clash or a collision ahead of you on the course, then you need to think. So you're going to need to, first of all, look around you at the other gigs. Where are they in location to you? What's right behind you? What's your left? What's your right? What's just ahead of you? Either side's there, which direction are they separating in, etc., etc. Then you're going to think, okay, where can I go safely that's going to not lead to me colliding or engage with those boats that are already starting up? If I go left, am I going to then come into my own collision with a boat that's also on the left? Maybe I need to steer right, for instance, or is there any navigational hazards like a sandbank or a buoy on those things there? So thinking is really, really important at this moment. So this is why I'm saying look, think, act. Okay, you act only after you've looked, only after you've thought on there. Now, to give yourself a little bit more time, you may slow the gig. So you might say, take pressure down on that. Remember, giving double commands makes it more likely that they're going to hear and process it. First time they hear, they're like, what's that? Oh, take the pressure down. There we go. I heard it properly the second time. Okay, I heard an urgent statement being made, didn't quite catch it. Second time, oh, I got that. That's always helpful. Say it twice if it's important. Anyway, so you might do that, and that can be helpful to you. If you need to sort of turn hard, then obviously you can use the rudder, but you can also get one side to hold water while the other side rows. And again, only do that for like 2-3 strokes normally, and then back up together, and that will just swivel the boat around quite hard. But again, you need to make sure that's not going to then put you powering into another crew. Okay, so just bear that in mind. Okay, then when we look at the clash collision, so in the event that you haven't come together, whether it be a minor one or a major one, first say calm. Yeah, it's happened. You can't stop it now. It's happened. Okay, so calm and focus. What you're then going to do, you're going to look around you again. You're going to look, see if anyone going to plan the back of you. Can you pull out there? You're thinking it through. Then you're going to act to separate the gigs and regain the course. Now, there will always be a gig either to the left or to the right of you in some ways, most likely. Okay, in some situations it might be end up backing up a little bit, but in most situations it's going to probably be something like what we've got in the little diagrams there. So we see in one them coming together, the blades between A and B are being taken out there. So you can see I've only got the blades represented on the ends, and then also we've got our 5 rower and our stroke rower being represented by those little arrows there. Okay, so then in 2 they've fully come together. So there's a variety of oars being thrown up, etc. there. So at this point you're going to probably put your rudder over to steer away from that gig. So let's say if you're B, you're going to be putting that rudder to move away from A. So that's there. However, the rudder is only going to be working if you've got motion. Okay, so one thing you might want to do at this point is, if you've still got some motion on the boat, you might at this point ask for here, if boundary side is tangled, you might say stroke, okay, stroke, hold, or back. And what that's going to do is it's going to, again, just pivot the boat, and that's going to give space for your person up in 2 if you're in the B boat, or in A it's going to be on the other side, flip round. That's going to give them enough space to get that blade back in and take a couple of strokes, and then you're going to have the 3 then join in, then the 1 join in, and you're going to be pulling away, getting them up together on those things there. And as soon as you've made that space, you can start building that rate. And if you can make that space, and if you can get yourself sorted back quicker than the other crew, you know what? You're probably going to get away from that collision coming off the better. All the time, keep your crew calm. Be calm. Don't be shouting high pitched. Don't be listening. Keep it calm, commanding, controlled. Okay. Later on, when you're back on the shore, you can be like, "Oh crap, that was a bit shitty." But you know, you want to make sure that this is good. Okay, so by the time you're reaching what looks like 4, you want your rowers to be finding water, pushing away on those things there. No coxswain wants to cause a clash that's any good, because it will always slow and lead to an issue for their crew. It risks damaging their kit, etc. There. We are going to do a collision drill as part of our session, but that's what we're looking for you to be aware of. Okay, right. So for the practical, what we're going to do, we're going to practice lining up and starting with the current pushing away from the line. Okay, so that's 200 meters of rowing, then 1 ease down. Okay, so that's going to be the one where we're up with the current pushing us away from the line. That's in some ways the easier one. Then we're going to turn around, face the other way, and we'll then practice lining up the start with the current pushing us towards it. Now again, that's the one which we're most likely to go over the line of accident, and as such we've got to be very careful there. Okay, we'll then probably have, because I want to try and knock off the adrenaline off the older rowers there, we'll do maybe a couple of 500-meter races just to get them going through there, just to calm them down a little bit. And then what we're going to do, our third exercise is going to be, we're going to pair up the gigs, we're going to slowly bring them together, and then we're going to go through the motions of separating the gigs. Okay, we need to be careful of kit here, watching out for pins, and obviously blade, obviously trying not to hit people with your blade, etc. That will result in a at least 3-month ban, I think it was, one of our past rowers. So please, we're going to do this, we're going to be careful, we're going to practice that coming together and separating gigs, and then we're going to go back. If there's any time left in the session, we're going to go back and we're going to practice a few buoy turns. Please rewatch the buoy turn video session for that if you missed that session, to try and help you with that a little bit as well. Okay, then what we're going to do is the rowers will come and they'll cover the gigs, and we'll do a debrief with the coxswains, talking about what it is that we happened, what it is worked, what it didn't, how we can improve, and how we can go forward from there. Okay, thank you for giving this time to the video. It's taken a little bit longer than I thought it would to explain, but hopefully you will have watched and thought it through, and it will make a lot of sense to you when we do the practical.